Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about 10 must-have sleepers to target late in your fantasy football drafts in 2024. For this video, we're going to be talking about players going in the 10th round or later, which in a 12-team league, the parameters for today's video would be pick 1, 9, and on. You can win your league by drafting the correct players late in drafts. These late round upside players could end up being the reason why you bring home your fantasy football championship. And in today's video, I want to talk about 10 guys that I believe have that upside. If you guys are new to the channel, before we get on into things though, make sure you guys do hit that subscribe button down below while you're down there. Whether you are new to the channel or not, make sure you leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So now let's get on in to today's video. We begin with the first must-have sleeper, and that is Magic Mike Williams, wide receiver of the New York Jumbo Jets. Aggregate ADP from ESPN Sleeper, NFL, and RT Sports have him as the wide receiver 54 at pick 140, and I suspect that Mike Williams' ADP is going to continue to keep on rising. I'm not sure if his ADP will go earlier than the 10th round to where he wouldn't qualify as a sleeper, but I do definitely believe his ADP is going to continue to rise as he recently came off of the physically unable to participate, the PUP list. Now, his availability for week 1 is still in question, but earlier on in the offseason, we learned of the team's plan for Mike Williams, and that plan was for him to be on the Breece Hall timeline. And spoiler alert, if you don't remember last season, Breece Hall played very well up against the Buffalo Bills in that cursed game 1 for the Jets up against the Bills, where Aaron Rodgers ended up tearing his Achilles. Mike Williams' season was cut short last year, thus why he could have potentially started the season off by missing a game or two. He tore his ACL in week number 3, but when the guy was healthy, he was a top 10 receiver in fantasy football, wide receiver 10 in PPR points per game. Something that a lot of people love to sling onto Mike Williams' name is the fact that he is injury prone. But if you actually look at his career so far, starting in 2023, so he played in 3 games last season, 13 the seasons prior, 16, and then 10 games. Sure, has he missed games in his career? Yes, but I do believe that Mike Williams isn't this completely and utterly injury-prone player like a lot of people like to say about him. Last year, in those 3 games, he was averaging 8.7 targets per game, 6.3 receptions per game, 83 receiving yards per game, and he scored 1 touchdown, which is .33 per game. Now, I love to bring up the fun efficiency stats to really help bolster my opinion on certain players that I really like, or maybe some players that I don't like. But in terms of efficiency, Mike Williams only played 3 games, so he didn't even qualify for most of the efficiency stats due to only playing in a couple of games. Mike Williams is in a very solid situation in New York with the Jets. Even if Aaron Rodgers isn't looking like he did when he was the back-to-back Michael Jordan 96-97 MVP of the National Football League, as long as he is 75% of that, I think that Mike Williams could finish inside of the top 12 at the wide receiver position. I believe that Aaron Rodgers is good enough for 2 wide receivers on the Jets to have the upside to finish inside of the top 12. Now, obviously, that's a bit of a wet dream scenario, but it is very possible that Mike Williams coming off the board as the wide receiver 54 can be a very reliable flex piece for you with the huge upside that Mike Williams possesses. Mike Williams is a very solid red zone threat due to his length, his girth, his tonnage. So I fully expect Mike Williams to have a very solid year in New York with the Jets this season. And wide receiver 54 is quickly going to be a price of the past because, again, I really do think his ADP is going to rise. Staying with Chargers players. Now, Mike Williams is a former Charger. This guy is now a Charger who benefited last year from the injuries of Keenan Allen as well as Mike Williams, and that is Joshua Palmer, wide receiver of the LA Chargers, aggregate ADP wide receiver 57 at pick 150. Now, he was only the wide receiver 46 in PPR points per game, playing in 10 games with 6 starts. He ranked 70th in targets, 67th in receptions, 55th in receiving yards, and 76th in total touchdowns. Are those stats mouth-watering? Of course not, right? Not the best stats on earth, but in terms of efficiency, he was 18th in yards per target and 18th in yards per reception. If you actually take a look at the game log from last season, he had 2 games where he scored over 18 PPR points per game, and we really saw a bunch of games where he had 7 or more targets. From weeks 3 through week 7, he had 7 or more targets in every single one of those games. And then he closed out the season with 8 targets against the Buffalo Bills and 10 targets up against the Kansas City Chiefs. His target competition is as light as it gets. Quentin Johnston was a complete and utter fucking letdown last season, and there is nothing based upon training camp that is telling me that Quentin Johnston is going to bounce back. Quentin Johnston drops every single thing. He's like modern day Nelson Aguilar. Quentin Johnston wouldn't have been able to catch AIDS from Magic Johnson or from Jenna from the Forrest Gump movie, right? This guy is absolutely terrible. And I understand maybe he needs that second year juice, that second year leap. But unless the guy's on the juice and magically learned how to catch, I don't really see Quentin Johnston projecting very well this season. I think Joshua Palmer's biggest rival in this offense for targets will be Ladd McConkey. They also have Baby Chark, Baby Chark, DJ Chark, as well as Brandon Rice. But none of those guys, I think, at least for this season, will be able to out-target Joshua Palmer. I get that this will be a run-heavy team under Mr. Harbaugh, new head coach of the LA Chargers. But with Justin Herbert, the pervert, as the lead quarterback on this team, I think that Joshua Palmer's another guy that could end up being a very reliable flex piece for your team that you can find as the wide receiver 57 off the board. At number 3, we switch positions here to Jerome Ford, F-150 running back of the Cleveland Browns, aggregate ADP running back 41 at pick 121. Now, we talked about Jerome Ford very recently in my league-winning running backs video, and the reason why I decided to talk about him again is because I want to really push forward the narrative that I believe that Jerome Ford could be an absolute smash pick based upon where he's coming off the board, based upon current ADP. Last season, he was the running back 16 in PPR and the running back 25 in PPR points per game, 17 games played with 12 starts. 12 carries per game, 47.8 rushing yards per game, 3.7 targets per game, 2.6 receptions per game, 18.8 receiving yards per game, and 12th in terms of total touchdowns with 9 total touchdowns. So he only starts 12 games, but he ranks top 14 in targets, top 17 in receptions, and he's 15th in terms of receiving yards. In terms of efficiency, he ranked 14th in yards created. So on paper, obviously, Jerome Ford isn't the second coming of LaDainian Tomlinson or something like that. He can't even realistically hold the jockstrap of his teammate, 9-inch Nicholas Chubb, because the jockstrap's too big, obviously. Shout out to Nick Foles, who just retired, absolute legend. But Jerome Ford is in a very solid scenario to succeed. Because while Nick Chubb has begun working on change of direction stuff, in addition to full speed sprinting, the team, reports are saying the team is being very cautious as to not pressuring him by putting a timetable on his return. Based upon stuff that I've read, it seems as though Nick Chubb could be out for the first 6 to 8 weeks of the season. Now, I understand that if any running back was going to be a superhuman Wolverine style and just regenerate from that crazy, insane injury that he suffered last season up against the Steelers, it would be Nick Chubb. But let's be honest. I understand that I am as much of a doctor as Manuel Ferreira, but I do genuinely believe that Nick Chubb, even if he comes back 6 to 8 weeks into the season, they might look to tease him in, right? They look to just ease him into this lineup. And maybe Nick Chubb isn't even useful until like the last 4 games of the season. And there's also a chance that Nick Chubb comes back, doesn't look like the old Nick Chubb, and they continue to just run the rock with Jerome Ford. So Jerome Ford has the upside to be a 6 to 8 week starter for you because this Cleveland Browns offense projects to be relatively solid. Running back 41 off the board. There's a guy that could be a running back 2 that you have on your squad that you are starting if you do maybe a hero running back build or a 0 wide receiver build, right? Where you're kind of just plugging and playing at the running back position. Jerome Ford is a guy with 15 plus point upside in positive matchups, and his competition is very light. Donta Foreman now back at practice after a scary neck injury. They had to helicopter the dude to a hospital. I'm glad he is A-okay. Anytime you hear something about a neck injury where they have to helicopter the guy off, obviously that just puts scary thoughts into my mind. And then followed by Nyheim Hines. They don't have Kareem Hunt anymore, so Jerome Ford has a strong stranglehold over the pass catching relevance in this backfield as well. So Jerome Ford as a late round target to me feels like a guy that is very easy to see the upside of. And again, if Nick Chubb doesn't really come back in full form, Jerome Ford could be a guy that you might be able to start for the whole entire season. Moving into late round player number 4 that I like, it is Caleb Williams, quarterback of the Chicago Bears, aggregate ADP quarterback 15 at pick 114. And I think that Caleb Williams ADP is he's going to be another guy that moves up in ADP, not really because of his play, but I think he'll move up because a lot of people will fall in love with him from the Hard Knocks HBO series. Caleb Williams is a quarterback that, while he doesn't have this insane rushing upside like Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, right, where he puts on 2 moves and the guy could run 60 fucking yards straight to the crib, has some solid rushing upside, right? 97 rushes for 142 yards and 11 touchdowns. And the seasons prior in 2022 at USC, he rushed for 384 yards and 10 touchdowns. Last year at USC, he had 388 passing attempts in 12 games for 266 completions with a 68.6% completion percentage, passing for 3,633 yards, 9.4 yards per attempt, and 30 touchdowns with just 5 interceptions. Now, I understand that a lot of people like to make fun of Caleb Williams, this, that, and the other thing. He's a rookie quarterback, blah, 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 blah. So if you want to draft another quarterback with Caleb Williams, go right ahead, right? Wrap the condom over your team, draft Caleb Williams, package him with Matthew Stafford, package him with another veteran quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins, right? But Caleb Williams is in a perfect situation to succeed. When has a rookie quarterback ever showed up to the NFL in this good of a situation? The running backs are DeAndre Swift, Roshan Johnson, and Khalil Herbert. Now, I understand the Bears don't have Christian McCaffrey or Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall, some of the better running backs in the NFL, but that is a solid threesome, a solid trio. At wide receiver, in my opinion, they have the best trio at the wide receiver position. The best threesome since the time that Angela White, Mia Malkova, and Riley Reid all linked up, right? DJ Moore, Roma Dunze, and Keenan Allen. At tight end, they got Cole Kmet, and in my opinion, they have a top half offensive line. So Caleb Williams is in a very solid situation to succeed. People have gotten down on their knees to massage the taint of Caleb Williams, talking about how this dude is a generational prospect. All you got to do is throw on the tape. You can see how great Caleb Williams is. Now, maybe it takes a couple of weeks into the season for him to really be that guy, but genuinely with the rushing upside he possesses, with the weapons he has around him, he has a fully loaded arsenal. I love the upside of Caleb Williams. And if I'm not able to get some of those top 10 guys that I really like, I think that Caleb Williams has a lot of upside coming off the board as the quarterback 15 at number 5. We move to the tight end position. Pat Freiermuth, tight end of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Aggregate ADP, tight end 15 at pick 113. 33. Now, if you had Pat Freiermuth last season, it was a disaster, right? He was a bust of mega magnitude, right? He was a terrible pick. Tight end 29 in PPR, tight end 28 in PPR points per game, 12 games played. The guy gets fucking hurt. He misses 5 games with a hamstring injury that he sustained in week number 4. We all know the hammies tend to linger. Not the best for players in the National Football League or for anyone, right? Even if I had a hamstring injury, that would be terrible for me, right? It would be hard for me to wake up and walk to my desk to make these videos. 47 targets, 3.9 per game, 27th. 32 receptions, 2.7 per game, 28th. 308 receiving yards, 25.7 per game, 32nd. 2 total touchdowns, 27th, right? A steaming pile of dog shit. But you have to understand that the situation is a lot different now. New offensive coordinator Arthur Smith targeted the tight ends at the highest rate last season in Atlanta. Now, if you had Kyle Pitts, you probably didn't know that because Kyle Pitts really wasn't all that great, but Jonnu Smith was having solid games. And if you go back to the days in Tennessee with Arthur Smith, the tight ends were targeted at a very high rate there. And I believe we're going to be seeing a ton of 2 tight end sets inside of this offense. And with Arthur Smith loving that fat tight end, shout out to Kelsey Monroe, I really do think that Pat Freiermuth is going to have his best season yet. If we look back to just 2022, he had 63 receptions on 98 targets for 732 receiving yards and 2 total touchdowns. Look, I get the 2 total touchdowns number isn't the best, but if he scored 4 or 5 touchdowns, there would be people giving the Sukalamink special to Pat Freiermuth. The quarterback upgrade should be able to help Freiermuth out a ton. I understand no one really loves Justin Fields or Russell Wilson, but when you had Kiss and Titties Mitchell Trubisky, you had Kenny Pickett, Mitch Trubisky, who we already mentioned, Mason Rudolph, the red-nosed reindeer, throwing you the ball, anything's an upgrade. So Pat Freiermuth is in a solid situation to succeed. A wrench could be thrown slightly into things if they end up bringing in Brandon Ayuk. But even so, I still like Pat Freiermuth as a valuable tight end at tight end number 15. At number 16, we got DeMario time. DeMario Douglas, wide receiver of the New England Deflatriots. Aggregate ADP, wide receiver 70 at pick 189. Wide receiver 64 last year in PPR and wide receiver 66 in PPR points per game. Played in 14 games with 7 starts as a rookie, 78 targets, 49 receptions, 561 receiving yards, and a grand total of, drumroll please, 0 total touchdowns despite ranking 18th in target separation. The guy was able to get open. He had the 76th target quality rating. Mac Jones and the Zappinator, Bailey Zappi, just could not get it done. DeMario Douglas is another guy that is in a very solid situation in terms of the depth chart around him. Sure, they have TikTok legend Juju Smith-Schuster, but that guy wasn't worth anything last season. I told you guys to avoid him like the bubonic plague. That ended up paying off. Jalen Polk is there, who I like a decent amount. They got Kendrick Bourne, Javon Baker, right? So they have these players with some high upside, but none of these wide receivers are even being drafted in a lot of leagues, right? The wide receiver number 1, whoever it ends up being, if it's Mario Douglas or Polk, those would be my 2 best guesses. These are guys that you could just pick up off the waiver wire, right? They are going undrafted in most leagues, and I think that is ludicrous. DeMario Douglas, for the shitty situation he was in, with the team imploding weekly, with Bill Belichick seemingly just thinking about smashing his new 26-year-old girlfriend, or however old she is, Mac Jones being straight up dookie, Bailey Zappi not being good, right? DeMario Douglas was not in a great situation. I understand Jacoby Brissett, Drizzy, Drake May, right? None of these guys are all that exciting, but I think the quarterback play will be better, and head coach Gerard Mayo has been pretty positive on DeMario Douglas. A few days ago, he said, it's just the quickness and the speed for DeMario Douglas. I agree. He does have great speed. He is a smaller guy. Also agree on that, but he is very elusive. Just his ultimate competitive attitude, I think he really helps this offense go as far as energy is concerned. While I also like Jalen Polk, and I think Jalen Polk could be a steal as well, the guy I'm going to give the stamp of approval for is going to be DeMario Douglas. This was a guy that put up solid games in fantasy football last year without even scoring a touchdown. Now, he did not end up eclipsing 15 points in a single game, but he had games with 12, 10, 14 fantasy points, 11 fantasy points, which off the waiver wire isn't all that bad. Again, the guy is basically free. If you draft a TJ Hawkinson in your draft and you have an IR spot, you can draft TJ Hawkinson and then just pick up DeMario Douglas and stash him on your bench. I understand that the Patriots aren't going to magically go from being this offense that was legitimately hard to watch. You'd almost be better off watching paint dry or watching the grass grow, and then magically they're going to turn into the Kansas City Chiefs or the Dolphins or something like that, right? One of the more exciting offenses in the NFL. But I think that the wide receiver one on this team will be valuable. The wide receiver one on any team can be valuable. And I think with better quarterback play, DeMario Douglas is in for a huge second season. Moving now to player number 7 here. We got Chase Brown, running back of the Cincinnati Bengals. Aggregate ADP running back 39 at pick 119. Now, a lot of people have been hyping up Chase Brown. I haven't really seen too many Zach Moss truthers like myself. And while I definitely would say that in a vacuum, I prefer Zach Moss over Chase Brown, I also think you should still be looking at drafting Chase Brown at the discounted price, because whichever one of these running backs ends up being the starter, or if an injury was to happen to Zach Moss, then Chase Brown would be in the driver's seat for being the lead running back on one of the better offenses in the NFL, an offense that can produce fantasy football running backs. We saw last season and the last couple of seasons that even with Joe Mixon kind of losing a step, not looking like his former self, his yesteryears, was still able to put up very solid fantasy football production. So if Chase Brown could end up being the guy, there's a lot of untapped upside. Now, last season, you look at the stats, right? Joe Mixon is that guy. He's getting all of the touches, essentially. 44 carries, 179 rushing yards, 15 targets, 14 receptions, 156 receiving yards, and he had that one long touchdown, running back 69. Very nice, I like, in PPR points per game, right? So nothing special, right? But again, you have to kind of just understand the situation that Joe Mixon was the workhorse running back. Now, offensive coordinator Dan Pitcher on Zach Moss and Chase Brown a couple of days ago. I'm super pleased with both of these running backs. Zach has been a consummate pro. He is where he needs to be every single play, regardless of what we ask him to do. He's caught every ball we've thrown to him, like a lot. Even the contested catches off of his body. Can't be happier with Zach. Chase is the young building talent that we all expected him to be, who adds the explosive element to our rushing attack and catching the ball out of the backfield. So we feel like we are in a very, very good spot. Zach Taylor, head coach of the team, also has talked about Chase Brown and what he likes most about Chase Brown, his favorite thing he saw, and that is the consistency. Chase has been very consistent, and that's what we're counting on him to do. He didn't get a ton of opportunity last season, and so now is really his first time seeing a bunch of reps. Bunch of reps, keyword, and I like how consistent and dependable he has been. Taylor also talked up Chase Brown's pass protection and lack of errors, which is very big for a running back being able to stay on the field. So Zach Moss being there is definitely a roadblock. And again, I definitely prefer Zach Moss over Chase Brown, but if something was to happen to Zach Moss, knock on wood, we don't root for injuries, Chase Brown could become a guy that we're talking about weekly as a reliable running back too. And if nothing happens to Zach Moss, maybe Chase Brown cuts in enough of the workload to where in certain scenarios you can be starting Chase Brown weekly. We saw the upside last season. We just have to see his utilization increase. At number 8, we got J.K. Dobbins, running back of the Los Angeles Chargers. Aggregate ADP running back 43 at pick 131. Now, we talked about J.K. Dobbins in that same video. We talked about Jerome Ford, the league-winning running backs. Now, just like we talked about with Chase Brown, how I prefer Zach Moss, I also would prefer Gus Edwards over J.K. Dobbins. But J.K. Dobbins is free, and Gus Edwards a lot of the time goes before the 10th round even begins. Now, J.K. Dobbins is a guy that when you think of injury-prone player, you close your eyes, you will probably think of J.K. Dobbins, right? If you have drafted J.K. Dobbins in fantasy outside of his rookie year, you have basically been completely torched by the guy. He played one game last year, tore his Achilles in the third quarter of week number 1 up against the Texans, right? 8 carries for 22 yards and a tug, 2 receptions on 3 targets for 15 yards, 11.7 PPR points. This guy has been incredibly injury prone, like I said. He has only played in 24 total games since he got to the NFL in 2020, and 15 of those 24 games were back in 2020. 2023, he had the Achilles tear. 2021, the LCL tear, which is in the knee, the ACL, and a thigh hamstring tear. So the whole fucking leg got messed up back then in 2021. But you have to understand that while he might be injury prone, while he is definitely a clear injury concern, it doesn't mean that he's guaranteed to get hurt this season. And if he plays, he is going to be splitting touches with the Gus Bus. Greg Roman, the offensive coordinator of the Chargers, recently said, "I'm excited to see Mr. J.K. Dobbins tote the rock this season and catch some balls. Don't sleep on him here." Again, we talked previously with Joshua Palmer about how much the LA Chargers are going to look to run the ball. And we know Greg Roman, formerly of the Baltimore Ravens, loves J.K. Dobbins just like he loves Gus Edwards. In terms of skill, J.K. Dobbins is levels above Gus Edwards. The only reason why Gus Edwards is getting ranked ahead of him is because there is not as many blaring, blatant health concerns, the warts on the profile, as well as the touchdown upside, right? If J.K. Dobbins had played in more games than this, he'd probably still be on the Ravens, and no one would be taking him as the running back 43. He'd be going much higher. Again, there is clear injury risk, but as you get deeper and deeper into the draft, you want to take the shots on the upside plays, the guys with home run potential, and J.K. Dobbins could stand up at the plate and hit a fucking home run, Barry Bonds style, all steroids out to the gills, hit it out of the stadium, hit some guy chilling on a kayak or a canoe out in the San Francisco Bay. So J.K. Dobbins, the risk is real, but the upside is significant. At number 9, we got Darnell. Here comes the Mooney, the guy with probably the coolest nickname compared to his ability, right? We've got some fun nicknames on players like Magic Mike Williams, right? Shout out Channing Tatum. Shout out to the Gambit. I wish I could do his accent, but Darnell Mooney, aggregate ADP wide receiver 67 at pick 184. While we did just kind of shit on his ability, I do think that Darnell Mooney has been led amok, run astray by the quarterback situation in Chicago. Last year, he played in 15 games. What was the wide receiver? 91 in points per game, 60 targets, 31 receptions, 414 receiving yards, and 1 total touchdowns, right? Not good. But now he's in Atlanta, where Rondale Moore suffered a season-ending knee injury, which means that now Darnell Mooney is the locked and loaded wide receiver 2 on this offense. Will he be the number 2 guy in terms of targets when they have Bijan, Kyle Pitts, and Drizzy Drake London? Probably not, right? But Darnell Mooney in 2021 had a breakout season. He had 81 receptions on 140 targets for 1,055 yards and 4 scores like his name was Abe Lincoln. Darnell Mooney has it in him to easily outpace the wide receiver 67 ADP. With Kirk Cousins under center, who we've seen be able to elevate multiple pass catchers at the same time, with a new offensive system, with a better head coach, I think that Darnell Mooney is being heavily slept on. Again, is Darnell Mooney the greatest prospect ever? No. But in fantasy football, a lot of the time, what really plays out for you, what really helps you, is the guys getting the volume, the guys with the upside due to the offense they're in. And I think the Atlanta Falcons are going to end up being a sneaky good offense this season. And I think Darnell Mooney is going to have a humongous bounce back. At number 10, we got Romeo Doubs, wide receiver of the Green Bay Packers. Aggregate ADP, wide receiver 53 at pick 138. Before we get out of today's video, though, and finish out with Romeo Doubs here, I want to give you guys a quick word from our friends and our sponsor over at Underdog Fantasy. If you guys are new to Underdog Fantasy and don't know what they are the best place to play best ball fantasy football this summer. If you don't know what best ball is, it's the best part about fantasy football. It's the draft, and that's it. There's no waivers, no trades, no in-season management. Underdog will automatically put the highest scores into your lineup every single week for you. They have tournaments with as low as buy-ins as $3 or $5. Their main tournament, Best Ball Mania 5, $25 to enter, $1.5 million to first place. If you sign up by clicking on the link in the video description or by using promo code Notorious if you're a first-time depositor, you'll be able to claim a special pick plus up to $250. So make sure you guys check out Underdog Fantasy, link in the video description, or by using promo code Notorious. So Romeo Doubs is a guy that I found myself taking a lot on Underdog Fantasy, and I'm starting to really reconsider drafting him more in redraft. I have been someone that has really been hyping up the Green Bay Packers. I'm like the biggest Green Bay Packers fan that isn't a fan of the Green Bay Packers, right, in real life. I'm a Dolphins fan. Wide receiver 36 last year in PPR, 47 in PPR points per game. Last season, he had 96 targets, 5.6 per game, 59 receptions, 3.5 per game, 674 receiving yards, 39.6 per game, and 8 total touchdowns, 11th. Romeo Doubs is another one of these guys that is one injury away from being a legitimate league winner, from being a legitimate, reliable piece on one of the top offenses in the NFL with a great quarterback in Jordan Love. I don't think Jordan Love is some one-hit wonder, some one-year wonder guy. If you look at the Packers wide receiver usage when Christian Watson played last season, so only when Christian Watson played last year, which is 11 games, including the playoffs. This is a tweet from Adam Levitan. 3 wide receiver sets. Jayden Reed was in 90% of the time. Romeo Doubs, 83%. Christian Watson, 75%. Wicks, 38%. 2 wide receiver rate. Romeo Doubs was first with 78%. Watson, 69%. Very nice. I like. Shout out Borat, 33%. Wicks, and only 3% Jayden Reed. There's been a lot of hype for Romeo Doubs in training camp. There has been a lot of hype on Romeo Doubs from his quarterback, Jordan Love. Jordan Love talks about how much he loves throwing the ball to Romeo Doubs in the red zone, hence why he scored 8 total touchdowns last year. Now, obviously, I'm a Jayden Reed glazer. Jayden Riley Reed, I love him. I love Christian Watson. Well, let's be honest. Let's call a spade a spade. Christian Watson isn't the most healthy guy on earth, right? He's not. He seems to always get hurt. So Romeo Doubs is one injury away, knock on wood, we don't root for injuries, for being incredibly fantasy relevant. And even if everyone stays healthy based upon those route rates, he could be very reliable, even as the quote-unquote number 3 option on the team. So thank you guys all so much for watching today's video. If you did end up enjoying, make sure you guys hit that subscribe button down below like it owes you some money. Make sure you guys leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFNTSY. Let me know what you guys think about my 10 must-have sleepers. Do you agree? Do you disagree? And let me know who your number 1, your numero uno sleeper is that you're looking to target in your fantasy football drafts this year. Check out one of the videos on your screen if you haven't seen them already. The rankings will be out very, very soon on Patreon. I had my friend Kevin edit the rankings so that they actually look good. They fit on 2 pieces of paper so you can print them and bring them to your draft. So make sure you guys check out one of those videos on screen. Rankings will be out very, very shortly. Love you guys all so much. Hope you have a great one. And as always, good boy.